Hey, everybody, and welcome back to this week's episode of the Women in Youth Ministry podcast. My name is Heather Kennison, and today's guest is Minister Alexandra Thomas. Alexandra is a licensed and ordained minister serving as a youth minister of the 412 Youth Ministry at the House of the Lord. She serves as a bivocational volunteer serving as the Community Engagement Manager for the Well Community Development Corporation. Alexandra loves being an advocate for others, serving those who are considered less than. People can uniquely connect to her by simply being them. No pressure, no pretense, no makeup, no mask needed. Simply come as you are. So, Alexandra, welcome to the podcast. You can go ahead and say hello.
Hi, everybody. I'm so excited to be here.
And then go ahead and share with us some kind of fun fact about yourself, completely unrelated to ministry.
Okay, cool. So I love this bird called the blue heron. It's unique to my area here in Akron, Ohio. And so when I'm riding my bike on the towpath trail, I look for this bird and I can spend hours just watching this bird and taking pictures uh, of this bird. So I've researched it, and they say when you get the opportunity to see a blue heron up close, it signifies that you have a lot of resilience and persistence because that's what the bird represents. So I like to think, because that's one of my character traits, that's why I'm so attracted to the bird, but it's a very beautiful bird. And I just like watching it. So that's a fun fact that's not related to ministry.
I love it. I always have to ask, for the fact not related to ministry, and our guests have gotten a lot better at it. But people, especially women, struggle finding anything about themselves outside of ministry. And obviously, we have maybe your families too. But what about you? So that's
Right.
that's a fun fact. Now, I got to meet you last year for the
Mhm.
first time at the Women Youth Ministry Conference, and you gained a little posse of people, a little club of people that we like to call the Grannies. Talk to
Yep.
us. How'd you guys come up with the name the Grannies?
So I am a grandma. I have now six wonderful grandchildren. And so I don't look like a grandma. And we
No.
also we also came up with the grannies because we learned that we all like to go to bed early. So like the group activity usually wasn't starting until 7. And it's like, oh my gosh, how long is it gonna go? Because I want to be in the bed by 9. So partly because I am a granny and I'm a young granny, and that we learned that we all like to go to bed early.
It floors me that you're a grandma. I can
Yeah.
process that. Although in my family, everyone had babies young. Like my mom had me at 19, her mom had her at 20. And
Hmm.
so if I had continued that trend, I would be a grandma in a few years, which is kind of wild.
It's a wild adventure.
Yeah. Yeah. Grannies. Yeah, you guys were a fun group of people, and you guys had your granny picture and your granny table. And
Yeah.
then yeah, it was really sweet. And then I was telling Alexandra before the podcast started that I had no idea she was bivocational because she brought so many people with her to the conference this year. So okay, can I have you give your 1 minute pitch for coming to the Women in Youth Ministry Conference?
So I was looking for a way to connect to other women in youth ministry, and being a part of a non-denominational body, you don't get to make those connections often unless you go out looking for them. So I found
Mhm.
a Facebook page, I joined, and I found place, and I found home. And I wanted to be able to connect to other women because they would share the same challenges, not just in youth ministry, but in ministry in general and just in life, whether that's family, friends. And so when I came across you guys, the first year I came by myself, and that's when I met the grannies. Then the second year, I was able to bring some people with me and even expand my friend platform. So that's how I came across Women in Youth Ministry, and it has been a tremendous experience for me. And I just would recommend to anybody to connect to this body. It's so diverse. Doesn't matter where you come from or what you're struggling with, how long you've been in ministry. Are you a pastor? Or are you a volunteer? So I'm just grateful.
That's great. Yeah. Well, I am grateful to know you and to have you as part of the community. And I'm really excited that you're going to be chatting with us today about something that you have been processing through like this season of your life, and you're calling it an unboxing. So, what is an unboxing for you? What does this mean?
So for me, when you have been in ministry for as long as I have, so I started in ministry at the age of 14, and I have no qualms of sharing that I'm 47. So I've been in ministry for a very, very long time. And because youth and families are my passion, I believe that that means to some people, and maybe to myself, that that's the only thing that I could do is
Mhm.
youth and families, which is very important. But for me, this unboxing has come really through my seminary experience. So, being a part of a non denominational body, seminary is not required for licensing or ordination. So, I didn't know many people who went to seminary. But in 2021, I heard the Lord clear as day said, "It's time for you to go to seminary." And I was like, "You gotta be kidding me." Um, but through my journey in seminary, I learned a lot about myself, some things that I already knew, but had been afraid to step out of the box. So I'm a strategic planner. That's not just, in the youth ministry box. Um, I'm a shepherd. That's not just in the youth ministry box. I'm an encourager. That's not just in the youth ministry
Mhm.
box. So, and I also learned that I'm a pretty good preacher. And in my context, you don't get to preach unless you're the senior pastor or
Mhm.
the lead pastor, which is not I. And we still have some struggles with where women should serve and where women can serve.
Mhm.
So in my unboxing, it is the Lord saying to me that you are multi gifted and multi talented. And while youth ministry and families are your passion, there are other places that gift, the giftings that you have, need to be used. And you need to allow me to free you up to use those, to unbox those gifts without necessarily needing validation from my home church. It's great to have that, but to not necessarily need that and to step out and um, allow my gifts to be unwrapped and be a blessing to other people while still serving my youth and families that I love so much. But it's a stretching and a growing for me in this unboxing time.
That's great. And I'm assuming that you probably have to unbox those gifts quite a bit being bivocational. What are some of the like skills or qualities that you have that maybe you have historically categorized as youth ministry skill sets that you use in like your day job, your 9 to 5?
So, in my 9 to 5, I am a community engagement manager who oversees two large inner city schools and parent support, teacher support. And I also oversee the community engagement for the organization as a whole. So, what that means is that I get to use my skills of knowing how to serve families well on a daily basis outside of my contact of my church. I get to use the strategic leadership in helping the organization learn how do the neighbors around our organization attach to our organization, all the while still walking in my call of um, serving people on the fringes and the people who um, are viewed as being less than.
Mhm.
So that's kind of the unboxing. I get to use some of that in the church, but not all of it because I'm kind of stuck over in my corner of youth ministry, even though I serve in some other capacities at the church as well. But those gifts get to be unboxed. I get to be more of an encourager and encountering women that don't have anything to do with ministry, right? So I get to use that in that gift of being an encourager. I'm a shepherd and a pastor, the vistas and the younger people at my organization that work under me who are believers. I get to nurture those things in them that are more women and young women specific and not necessarily, my middle schoolers and my high schoolers that I have in youth group. And it's just been an experience. Even in my seminary experience, I just graduated with my master's in practical theology on Saturday, and the
Woohoo!
vice president of academics came to me and said, "Would you like to teach a class? Have you ever thought about teaching?" And I'm going to co-teach homiletics with them.
Wow.
So again, that unboxing, that ability to be able um, to say, God, why would you gift me with all of these things if I'm only
Mhm.
supposed to keep them over here? And how do I use them?
Mhm.
So that's how it's kind of transpired.
Yeah. What are some of the reasons or the ways that women uniquely box them in? Because I would say that this unboxing is something that a lot of people listening can relate to, especially women.
Mhm.
What are some of the boxes that women tend to find themselves in that can be hard to get out of?
So I think one of the biggest boxes is that the patriarchal system
Hmm.
that as women, we are generally raised to be submissive and compliant. And not that there's anything wrong with submission at all. But when it comes to our male counterparts, I believe we tend to shrink even when we're not supposed to. We don't want to seem like we're being less ladylike or less docile, or we're not the Proverbs 31 woman. When, if throughout the Bible, who did the Lord show himself to first when he wrote? It was the women. The women are the people who get the things done. And it's not just taking care of the children or over in the children's ministry or doing those administrative things. We are called and created to lead. Um, so we have to, it's an obstacle to overcome where we want the patriarchal systems to applaud us and see what's in us, but we have to lend to the Heavenly Father who has already told us that, guess what? You are more than enough. I created you to be and to have all of these gifts. So we have to step out of that box that we place ourselves in and that we allow others to place ourselves in when our Heavenly Father has not called us to be boxed in. He's called us to step outside of that box and serve the people of God. So it's a two-way street. It's us getting comfortable in our own skin and being comfortable with our large personalities and everything the Lord has given us, and saying, basically, I am woman. Hear me roar. I'm here. And I refuse to be silent, is what we
Absolutely.
have to do.
Absolutely. Have you seen the Barbie movie?
I have not seen Barbie yet. I'm going to go see her on Saturday.
Oh man, I feel like every episode of the podcast this season is going to be me asking people if they've seen the Barbie movie. But the Barbie movie addresses the concept of patriarchy and the ways that we box ourselves in. So I'd be curious to hear from you after you see it. Like, how does that like lend itself? Because yeah, there's like these ways that we like we find ourselves having to fit into a certain mold. Um
Mhm.
as women, as youth ministers, as whatever. Um, and yeah, that's like very difficult. I think for me personally, as a female youth minister, I find that I don't fit into the typical categorization of what a youth minister should act like or look like or be like. I think I'm very different from that. I'm very high femme. It's pink everything all the time for me. I wear listen, my face is beat all the time. I'm always in full face. I own over 100 tubes of lipstick.
Yes.
I'm not gonna fit into that, you know? Yeah, like this year at the Women Youth Ministry Conference, I gave everybody a tube of my favorite lipstick. Like
Yes.
I'm not handing out like can koozies. Like that's just not me, right?
Absolutely. Right, right, right. And we appreciate that lipstick, trust me.
It's so good. True Therapy Cosmetics. Um, but it's like, I don't know, there's just like all these ways that like when I was younger in ministry, I used to like try so hard to fit into to different molds. And then I realized, no, like being true to myself is being true to God.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely. And how do we dishonor him if we're not true to
Mhm.
ourselves, which makes us true to him?
Mhm.
He's placed us in these very these unique places, and we're not supposed to be boxed in.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, we do definitely box ourselves in as youth ministers specifically. Why do you think that youth ministers box themselves so like in maybe more uniquely than other roles in the church?
Because I think there's sometimes a very unrealistic expectation on youth ministry. Like, oh my gosh, the youth department needs to be doing this. And it's like, well, that's not even, is that part of discipleship? What does that play? What role does that play in salvation? Um, so I
Mm-hmm.
think that there's a lot of pressure placed on us as youth ministers. Um, and some pressures are pressures that should be placed on families and parents, right?
Mm-hmm.
The Bible calls for parents to disciple their children and to raise their children in the way that they should go. Youth ministry is a supplement to that, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I inherited my youth ministry. I've always been a part of it, but as far as being over it, from a young man who was wonderful, a couple years younger than me, but he was a guy and he was a kid at heart.
Mm-hmm.
While I have some kid at heart tendencies, we're gonna learn. We're gonna talk Bible. We're gonna. Where are you with your walk with the Lord? And then we're gonna have fun. I'm not, blowing up water balloons. I'm not taking all the trips to Cedar Point first. I'm not rewarding kids who never come to youth group or don't come to church, who are not involved in, who are not engaged. So I think the unrealistic expectations that are sometimes placed on youth ministry causes us to be in this box because we feel like we have to conform to the rules, whether spoken or some that are unspoken that have been passed down for years. And what I believe that the change needs to come is that if there are rules in place and expectations, we need to use our voices to voice that either those expectations are realistic or they are unrealistic, because we're in youth ministry for a reason, because we've been called to this. We know this. We've studied it. We've studied other places. And most of the time, the people who are imposing these restrictions and causing us to be boxed in have never interacted with our young people,
No.
haven't talked to our parents, have no idea what's going on in the culture, what the kids are being exposed to, social media, LGBTQ issues, just all of these things. Most of the time, it's the people on the outside that have no idea of the conversations that need to be had that places us in these boxes. I recently had someone ask me, and I'm on our elders advisory board, and they walked through the youth center because we have a wonderful youth center. And they were like, well, I think I heard a conversation that was not about the Bible. You probably did. That particular day, we may have been talking about something that's trending on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram. But if you would have hung around a little bit, guess what? It's always going to get back to the Bible. But again, somebody on the outside believing that it has to be so rigid, where I believe there is a foundation, but you need to have some fluidity to that, right? If I have a kid that comes in and I say, "How's your week been?" and they say, "Man, it's been really rough at home because of this," and then I have 7, 8 other kids chime in, then guess what? The lesson kind of goes out the door and we move into a space of talking about whatever the issue is that we need to deal with at that time. So we have to be our biggest champions and our biggest voices, because the outside forces, at least in my context, are the people that are more so boxing you in or saying, well, you said you were called to youth ministry, so just stay over here in your youth ministry lane.
Mm-hmm.
I am called to youth ministry and that's my passion point, but I'm gifted that I can offer some insight over here because of the work that I'm doing in youth ministry. So because of the work that I'm doing in youth ministry, I may be able to inform a conversation about children's ministry, because guess what? Eventually I'm going to get those sixth graders. I'm going to get those fifth graders. I'm going to get those parents. And I may even get some of those volunteers, so I can inform a conversation over here. I can inform a conversation about the LGBTQ issue with our elders or our other leaders, because I am in youth ministry and
Mm-hmm.
I'm right here in the middle. I'm right in the trenches. I'm getting all the information and the training and the conversation for the young people. So let me facilitate some conversation over here. Take me out of my box and allow me to use my gift to inform and educate and move kingdom business forward on this side. And then guess what? I'm going to go back to my box because that's where the Lord called me to. But allow me to step outside of that and do some kingdom work over there too.
I wish I wish more like senior pastors would listen to that and would hear that, because one of my big issues in a parish that I served in was like when I would bring up issues that were, quote, not youth ministry related, it was like, well, thanks for your thoughts. And it's like, no, 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 I don't think you understand. I represent the next generations, two of them, Alpha Z. I hang out with them all the time. I talk to them. I know what they're thinking. They care about this stuff. They care about this stuff. And therefore, you need to care about it, right?
Mhm.
Like, there has to be, like, yeah, I think more senior pastors, people in leadership need to consider that youth ministers are not just representing what do we do in youth ministry, the programs, whatever, but also the voices and the intentions of the next generation.
Mhm.
Yeah. I hadn't thought about that. Some of the other things that I heard you say was like, there's almost, I am rewording this, but almost like a fear or a reverence of leadership or parents, right? That kind of holds you in your box. Another thing that I heard was like siloing. Youth ministry has typically been very siloed from the rest of the church. And, you know, intentionally or unintentionally, that's just the case. And so it's hard to break out of that silo. Another thing that you kind of hinted on that I think is really interesting, is there's like this tension in youth ministry of like, there is a very specific call to youth ministry, but sometimes people feel like my call to youth ministry means I can't do anything else, or they're so afraid of it being perceived as a stepping stone to go on and do anything else. But there's like a lot of fear that holds us back from discovering how our gifts could be used in the church. You made a face, so I want you to tell me what you think about that.
So I often get asked, how long will I be in youth ministry?
Mhm.
So I know that I have a pastoral call on my life. At my in my context, we have never had a named youth pastor. It's
Mhm.
usually the youth leaders, even when I've grown up in this church. So it's 49 years old. I've been there since I was 7. Um,
Mhm.
so I often get asked, well, when are you going to leave youth ministry and do something else? And my response is that youth ministry for me, I didn't go into youth ministry using it as a stepping stone. I believe my whole entire life has always been about youth ministry. I've worked in nonprofit for 15, 20 years, and it was always centered around youth and families and parents. Do I believe that I will always be the youth minister? Not if I believe in the things that the Lord has spoken to me and shown to me. Do I believe that I will always inform and in some way always be interacting with youth and young adults and their families? Absolutely. I do believe that I'll be doing those things. So I think people don't view youth ministry as important to the body. And it
Mhm.
is important. If this is where the Lord tells me I'm staying for the next 20 years, then I'm here for the next 20 years. But I believe people treat it as a set aside. Oh, well, you're over there in youth ministry. So what are you gonna do when you grow up? And it is, I'm gonna grow this up and grow the next leaders up
Mhm.
behind me. My capacity may not always look the same, but it's youth ministry is like, oh yeah, that's over there. And sometimes I believe people in the church and in the world do children's ministry the same way. Like, oh, it's over there. So what are you gonna do when you grow up in ministry? And it's like, wow, I'm full grown in this here ministry thing and giving the youth ministry and families everything that I would give in any other capacity. Part of my unboxing is realizing that I have a pastoral call, and what I do is pastor. I do. I might not be Pastor Thomas, but you can't minister in this capacity and not be pastoring. So I'm
Absolutely.
pastoring kids. I'm pastoring, families. So I think we have to change our thought process. Um, and we have to be okay that if the Lord doesn't ever call you to another place, your place is youth ministry, and that's okay. And it's not little. It's it's big. You think about the things that we encounter in the lives of these young people. I get my kids in 5th grade. So from 10 years old all the way through, some of them, the first year of college.
Mm-hmm.
The influence and the impact and the things that I get to walk alongside with them and their families, the good, the bad, the disappointing, the hurtful, is huge. I feel like in youth ministry, you spend more time influencing and impacting for Christ than any adult pastor
Mm-hmm.
ever gets to.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's truly relational. You get to wrap your arms around those kids. That's why it's so painful, I believe, in a grief process, if and when the Lord does call us to something different.
Mm-hmm.
When we do have to step out of that role, or when our kids do grow up and go off and go other places, or when parents pull kids out of youth ministry, all of these different things that take place, because in youth ministry and as women, we are so um, invested. I'm blessed to have my own children, but my kids in my youth department are my kids. I tell their parents, you have to share them with me. I want invitations to the birthday party, graduations, bar mitzvahs, wherever they are. I want basketball games. I want to be there. So I think we have to be okay with knowing that this is a high calling. It's not, down here on the bottom of the totem pole. It's a high calling and it's a weighty calling. You're talking about impacting young people's lives for Christ. So that means how I live, what I say, what I don't say can have an eternal, lasting, even more lasting impact, I believe, on young people than when you are discipling uh, adults. Because one turn off for a kid can turn them off for the rest of their lives. They might not
Mm-hmm.
ever make a decision for Christ, or they might not ever make a decision to walk away from whatever the thing is that's holding them back from being all that the Lord has called them to be. So I think it's in us to say this is not a stepping stone. And it's also in us to say to other people, I'm not using this as my next level to get to wherever, something bigger. I'm going to grow this and grow me in this. And
Mm-hmm.
that we have to be okay with that, walk boldly in whatever in that calling.
Yeah. And yet, if God calls you to something new, then that's okay too. Yeah,
Yes.
there's a moment, I served in a church for 10 years. And there was a moment in that time where I was like, I feel more called to this church than I do this position. And if there was something else that God wanted me to do here, I would be willing to do that as much as I love my job. It was just a different place for me. Um, and yeah. And then when leaving, it was hard, but I also knew how God had unboxed some of my gifts and shown me some different ways that I could serve. And so you have to be willing. Yeah. And yet, some of the best senior pastors have been youth ministers before. And like, don't
Yes.
we want more senior pastors who have youth ministry experience?
Absolutely.
So, so rather than getting mad when someone, steps up, goes to another role, maybe let's celebrate because they'll understand the woes. Um, okay, as we wrap up, can you share with us some ways that people can unbox themselves and find new passions? How does somebody do this work of unboxing themselves and discovering what they have to give that maybe they didn't expect?
So just a couple of ways. One is simply remembering that you are enough, whatever that enough is, that the Lord called you and you are enough to step into any role that He has gifted you. Two, I also believe that it's necessary to surround yourself with like minds. You just said something a few minutes ago, Heather, and I'm going to carry that with me, that at one point you felt more called to the work in the church than your position. I'm right there. And to hear someone else say that that is okay, share our stories, share your story, be transparent about where you are and how you're wanting to move. The other would be to get yourself a good mentor. Um, my being able to be okay with being unboxed came as a result of my seminary experience and a woman professor that I had that's over our doctoral program. And she was like, there is so much in you. Why are you just over here in your corner settling for whatever crumbs that they give you?
Yep.
And I sit at tables and I would be timid to share or timid to say, well, I'm thinking we should go this way, or can I suggest this? The Lord hasn't gifted you and called you for you to sit back and be uh, quiet. One of my favorite poems talks about how when we let our light shine, we give others permission to do the
Mm-hmm.
same. And I think those are all key things to being unboxed and just being self-aware, knowing that the gifts that the Lord has called you and equipped you with, the places that He has called you to, and the gifts that He has equipped you with, are not just to be kept in this little box. And there's a cost to that when you begin to be unboxed and being unwrapped. And people will say that, you need to stay in your place. This is my place. The Lord called
Mm.
me to um, this place. So just leaning in and trusting that everything that the Lord has given you, there is a place that He wants you to use those gifts that are not just to be kept in this nice little cute box that is our comfort zone and our safe place. Sometimes he wants you, not sometimes, to step out of that box because your gifts need to be used for the world. And there are some things that He has only given you to do. And if you don't do it, it won't get done. If
Hmm.
you don't use it and unwrap it and unbox it, it won't get done. So just walking in that confidence that He's given it to you, He wants you to use it.
Yeah, your statement about like light reminds me of the great prophet Lizzo. She says, "If I'm shining, everybody's gonna shine. I was born like this.
Absolutely.
Don't even gotta try." And like that phrase was my phrase for 2020, I believe. People asked me what my New Year's resolution was that year, and I was like, to shine. So that everyone else around me can shine. And it sounded kind of like hedonistic or like self-absorbed, but I was just so tired of like, yeah, of like not having my voice. And I was like, I need to find me. And I had come out of an experience in the church where I had been boxed by a supervisor like real hard, and it was difficult. And so that was my phrase. I listened to that song every day in 2020, just trying to like, yeah, get myself to another place and like really believe, that I had something to give. And she says, I'm like, Chardonnay, get better over time. I'm like, yes. Because as I get older, man, it's aging
It's aging.
and it's getting good. It gets better with age.
Yes, ma'am. It does. It does.
Yeah. So we are the Women in Youth Ministry podcast, and we have one question that we love to end each episode with. And that is, we are a podcast for all genders, but, or that all genders might listen to, but we specifically care about women. Is there something that you would like to share with women listening? It could be a word of encouragement. It could be related to what you've just shared. It could be something else completely different.
Just keep your eyes and your heart on your Heavenly Father. That's the best place and the softest place to be and to land. Just let Him speak to you.
I love it. I love it. All right. Well, it was so great having you on. We are going to link to where people can find you online in our show notes. Yeah, it's so great to have you.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure. Definite
Awesome.
pleasure.
Well, we will see you guys very soon.